Hello and welcome to the College of the Siskiyous Academic Success Center YouTube channel. This is the first video of this sentence series, where we will be breaking down sentences so that you're able to construct efficiently great sentences for your academic or creative writing. This video is about independent and dependent clauses. First, let's start off with the basics. What is a sentence? A sentence is a group of words which presents a complete idea. It includes a subject and a predicate. For example, Sarah skipped class. Sarah is the subject, skipped class is the predicate. In sentences, there is at least one main clause or the independent clause, and can have subordinate clauses or dependent clauses. What are clauses? Clauses are groups of words with a subject and a predicate. They make up a sentence. Independent clauses present a complete thought. The independent clause can stand on its own as a sentence. They're found in all sentences, as in every sentence needs to have at least one independent clause. However, sentences can contain multiple. For example, my arm has healed. That's an independent clause. It contains a subject, predicate, a complete thought, and it can stand alone as a sentence. However, dependent clauses, they also contain a subject and a predicate, but they cannot stand on their own. They do not present a complete thought. Dependent clauses are often used to introduce or support independent clauses. They often give context or any background information which completes the sentence as a whole. For example, with the sentence example we just used of the independent clause, my arm has healed, we are adding on the dependent clause, since I had surgery. Since I had surgery, my arm has healed. It provides a more clear overall understanding of the message being conveyed, provides background information for the independent clause. However, dependent clauses cannot stand on their own. They cannot be their own sentences without an independent clause. Since I had surgery. If that was its own sentence, it wouldn't complete the thought. You would be wondering what happened since the surgery, what happened after. Why are you introducing that without completing that thought, right? So it is necessary to provide the independent clause which completes that thought. And if you accidentally write a sentence with just a dependent clause, that's considered a sentence fragment and is incorrect. Dependent marker words. These are words which can turn an independent clause into a dependent clause. So some dependent marker words are when, since, prior to, as, because, due to, although, etc. There are many of them. For example, with the independent clause, my mom bought me new shoes. That's independent, has the subject, predicate, can stand on its own. However, by adding on the dependent marker word since to the beginning, it's implying that something happened since my mom bought me new shoes. And by leaving that as its own sentence, as a sentence fragment, it's just not providing that extra information that is necessary with conveying your thought of what happened after my mom bought me new shoes. Since what? Now let's do some practice. I suggest that you pause this video for a moment and think about these before I give you the answer. Which one of these sentences is independent? 1. When Fred drove to the store. Or 2. I laughed all day today. When Fred drove to the store, that is not independent because there was an independent clause or could have been an independent clause in this sentence fragment. Fred drove to the store. However, the dependent marker word when turned this independent clause or potentially independent clause into a dependent clause, which then makes the sentence fragment. I laughed all day today is independent because it contains a complete thought, a subject, and a predicate. Now let's do this for dependent clauses. Which one of these sentences is dependent? 1. We tried very hard on the project. Or 2. Before Stacy drove home. We tried very hard on the project is actually independent. It is not dependent because it can stand on its own, it conveys a complete thought, it has a subject and a predicate. However, before Stacy drove home, this is dependent, and it is a sentence fragment. Stacy drove home. that could have been independent, but the dependent marker word before makes this a dependent clause. Now, how do these work together? In sentences, there's often one dependent clause which supports an independent clause. However, like mentioned earlier in the video, there can be multiple dependent clauses and multiple independent clauses in sentences. Here's an example, a simple example with just one dependent and one independent. When I was 3, I loved to ride my tricycle. Now, which one of these can stand on its own and which cannot? Which one is dependent and which one is independent? When I was 3 is dependent, I loved to ride my tricycle is independent. And note that these are separated by a comma, which signifies that there is a dependent clause supporting or giving background to or for an independent clause. So why does this even matter? Understanding clauses is so important because a lot of punctuation is actually built off of the relationship between independent and dependent clauses. A lot of times when I work with students, they don't understand why a sentence functions the way that it does. So that's why it's so important to really understand your basics. Because as writers, regardless of how experienced we are, oftentimes we will write a sentence or read a sentence and it just won't seem right, but we don't know why. We might not know how to fix that. By understanding these basic building blocks, we'll be able to really break that sentence down and adjust it so that it sounds better. And like I said, punctuation is often based on clauses or the different elements of a sentence. So with students that struggle with punctuation, and almost every writer struggles with punctuation from time to time, they need to have a better understanding of clauses in order to really grasp punctuation, commas, semicolons, etc., in order to build proper sentences. Also, I've come across students a lot of times who assume that dependent clauses can stand on their own, and it's just simply because they don't know what a dependent clause is. So by understanding dependent clauses and understanding that leaving them on their own is a sentence fragment, you'll be able to avoid that in the future. Now, the next videos will be discussing punctuation and how that relates to clauses, and we will also be going over common sentence mistakes and other basic building blocks of sentence structure. I hope that this video has been helpful. You can find me on the ASC Canvas show, and I have a Zoom link in my hours there, so you can visit if you have any extra questions or just need any help or tutoring with English. Thank you very much.